Welcome to my American History Notes, where I discuss conclusions I've drawn from studying American history, things I've learned, conclusions you might not agree with, but that's okay as long as you come to your own opinion, your own conclusion about with your study of American history. And so I do hope that you'll dig into American history. Maybe I'll mention something that you would like to know more about, and you can just kind of research it. And you might just come to a total opposite or different conclusion than I would. But it's important that we're basically conversant now in American history. Now I'm doing several sessions on African American history, um, and I did like 11 sessions on slavery and things like that. But this is because what struck me was I wasn't taught anything about this in high school. In high school, you would think there was only white history and that blacks and Indians and Latinos were all peripheral fringe players. With a couple of exceptions, they just weren't mentioned. So there are a lot of people that I'm not going to mention, but because I just don't have time. These fascinated me. Things that interest me is what I'm talking about. So let's begin, and I hope that this will deepen your knowledge and hopefully get you to study um, American history, particularly in this case, African American history. So let's begin. Excuse me. The War of 1812 saw free blacks who were denied entry into the Army enlist in the Navy. From primary sources, it appears that black and white sailors worked and ate together, making the Navy the most integrated of the early services. Another primary source document reported that a great many of Master Commandant Oliver Hazard Perry's forces at the Battle of Lake Erie were black. In preparing for the British attack on New Orleans, General Andrew Jackson issued a proclamation to free black men to fight in their own companies, officered by white men, but with black non-commissioned officers chosen from among them. Of Jackson's 6,000 soldiers, it's estimated that 500 were black, formed into two battalions. The American Civil War initially saw few non whites enlisted in mostly Western regiments. In the Confederacy, blacks were employed to construct earthworks and fortifications. However, Union General John Logan insisted in his work, excuse me, The Great Conspiracy, that black Confederates did fight, and the Harvard Gazette reported that between 3 to 10,000 black Confederates fought for the South. And I'll post that Gazette article. Robert Smalls was an interesting African American figure in the early part of the war. He was conscripted by the Confederacy to serve aboard an ammunition transport ship. On May 13th, 1862, a black crew captained by Smalls hijacked the well stocked ship and turned it over to the Union Navy. He became a Northern celebrity and a spokesman for African Americans. After the war, he was a notable politician. Free blacks were enlisted early in 1862 in New Orleans. 400 black soldiers served in two or three Native American regiments as the Kansas Home Guards and fought for the Union. The 54th Massachusetts, composed of black soldiers, was the most famous black unit fighting for the Union. Their white commander, and many of them were killed at Fort Wagner. A list of the famous of the 54th Massachusetts includes Sergeant William H. Kearney, who won the Medal of Honor for action at Fort Wagner, where their white commander, the 25-year-old Colonel Robert Gould Shaw, was killed. Henry August Monroe was a 13-year-old drummer boy. By the end of the war, 10% of the Union soldiers in the U.S. Army were black. Now, Henry Flipper was the first black officer to graduate from West Point, having done so in 1877. His career was not a successful one, which historians attribute to endemic racism and actions against him. He was, though, the first non-white officer to lead soldiers of the Black 10th Cavalry, serving with distinction in wars against Native Americans, but was eventually court-martialed and dismissed. He then went on to notoriety and fame. He did a lot of things. He was involved in a lot of things with the West, and there's some terrific memoirs, and I have currently reading. He wrote the book The Colored Cadet at West Point. Another book of his memoirs was published long after his death, entitled Negro Frontiersman: The Western Memoirs of Henry O. Flipper. Fascinating individual. I recommend Henry Flipper. Study him. The 10th Cavalry, called by Native Americans Buffalo Soldiers, which would become a name for all black troops fighting on the vanishing frontier, would go on to serve in the Spanish-American War at San Juan Hill and Kettle Hill. Sergeant Major Edward L. Baker Jr. was one of 5 black soldiers who won the Medal of Honor in that war, that included Corporal Dennis Bell, Private Fitz Lee, Private William H. Tompkins, and Private George H. Wanton. Okay, we'll stop there and we'll go to World War One next time. And I hope that you enjoy this. And if you find that I made a misstatement or a fact that I put somebody in the wrong war, or some other egregious thing that I did carelessly, let me know because I'm always learning, constantly learning. I'd probably go back and redo this again at some future time, maybe do it differently. So I thank you for watching and study American history.